everybody. So good to see you. Great to be back, and thank you for joining us for the Royal Talens Creator Studio Live. My name is Jeff Olson. I'm the Art Education Director for Royal Talens North America, and I will be your host today. If you make a comment or ask a question and reside in Canada or the US, you will be eligible to win an assortment of Royal Talens oil paints, including Rembrandt, Van Gogh, and Cobra, and we might even throw in a set of gouache. We'll see how things go. But at the end of the broadcast, hang around. We'll announce the winner. You have to be on the live broadcast to be eligible for this. I'll call out your name and you can direct message me if you're the winner and we'll get you set up. So I got a great show for you today. This is our second of 2025. Our guest today is one of our original ambassadors and one of the hardest working artists I know. He is an Indianapolis-based artist specializing in plein air landscapes and cityscapes. He studied art education at Purdue University and taught elementary school art. After that, he received his law degree and passed the bar in 2010. But fortunately for us, he rekindled his love of art between classes and clerking, and in 2011 decided to pursue his art full-time. His work has evolved over the years from bright, whimsical watercolors and acrylics to more impressionistic landscapes in oils. He's an award-winning painter that has an extensive exhibition history, and his paintings are included in public and private collections around the world. Along with working professional sporting events, which you'll get to see a picture of, I'm excited for that. In recent years, he's been featured extensively on the HGTV show Good Bones, one of my favorite HGTV shows, becoming a reoccurring guest on the show, doing everything from painting murals to teaching the cast how to plein air paint. Everyone join me in welcoming Justin Vining. Justin, how's it going?
There we go. Okay. I think I'm here. Hey,
You are here.
great to see you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. You were on vacation, is that correct?
That is correct. I am in Marco Island, Florida, visiting my parents with my family and my kids. And we woke up and, well, I painted before everyone else woke up, well, actually, and then went to the beach. And yeah, we've been playing in the sand and playing in the pool and having a good old time.
Oh man, I'm so jealous. It snowed today in Seattle.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, in Indianapolis, I got a weather alert. We're getting like lightning, thunderstorm, freezing rain. I'm like, man, I am thankful to be in Florida.
My sympathies go out to the folks in Indy.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I'm glad I'm not there.
Well, I see you brought your easel with you on your vacation,
I
which,
did.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, this
good.
this is my travel one. It goes everywhere with me. It's been to Europe and to Seattle, to your neck of the woods, and I just had it a couple weeks ago out in Sedona. And what's fun is it actually the bottom of the palette, it's reversible. So it when I was in Sedona, I was painting in oils. So this side I use oils, and then on this side. It's a lot more built up, but this is what I use gouache. So I mostly paint in gouache. I have traveled with Cobra, and if I didn't have a buddy that had Gamsol off the plane, I would have definitely taken Cobra. But having the ability to have Gamsol, I took Rembrandts out to Sedona. But here down in Florida, and there's something I like about painting on the beach with water. And I don't know if this has any effect, but a lot of times I'll use with the gouache ocean water, so the salt content. And even this morning, I was throwing sand right into the painting to get sort of that salt effect, like you would in a typical watercolor. So
Yeah.
just sort of leaning into what's out there and letting it help me paint the paintings.
It's interesting you tried that because I often show a fun salt technique with watercolor painting, and this works for gouache too. What happens when you add salt to the water, it's just like swimming in the ocean versus swimming in a freshwater pool. It's easier to float.
Yeah.
And what happens with the pigments is they tend to sit on the top and they disperse more quickly
Mm,
throughout the water when the salt is added. Now, I don't know how much the pH affects the long-term stability of the paint film,
sure.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that it's fun to try out things like that and see what kind of results you can get.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't even thought about the archivalness of actually doing that. But I mean, I would have to think it was minimal unless you're just caking on the salt.
Yeah,
But
Yeah, no, I think you're fine. I think you're fine. So, for everybody out there, we have a great show set up for you. I've got a few more questions for Justin, and then we're going to take a look at some of his work and some fun images of his gallery. And then we're going to turn it over to Justin, and he is going to do the demo for us. Now, for some reason, the computer is not allowing me to spotlight him, so I'm going to try to keep my comments to a minimum so that you can pay attention to what he's doing there, and I won't see my face keep popping up again and again. All right, so I'm going to a couple questions before we look at the images. We talk about the ambassador program a lot and what an important role education plays in our mission. But I know education plays a role in your professional practice as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, man. The depth of which I could talk about that. I could talk about that all day long. But I have an education background. I used to be an elementary art teacher. So teaching has always been, a big passion of mine. And I think at least one of my favorite parts of the ambassador program is in my professional practice, I don't teach nearly as often as I used to. I teach privately some, which that's fun, but that is a different type of teaching than in the classroom. So getting in front of new people and getting them excited about, art and putting paint to the canvas and exploring. I did just do my wife recently sat in a class that I taught, and you'd think that after years of watching me paint, she would have picked up something, but she had a ton of fun. But she did struggle through that class. But I mean, it wasn't even about good or bad. It was just about having fun. So I still am teaching fairly regularly, but in a wide variety of context. But one of the things I do love about the ambassador program is you guys do give me opportunities in a variety of ways to get out back in front of people.
Yeah, there's just something about teaching that takes your understanding not only of materials but practice as well to another level. I mean, when you have to explain what you're doing to somebody else, it can help clarify your own ideas and help propel them forward as an artist. So I've always felt that teaching and my art practice are synonymous. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Question about mediums. So I'm glad you were talking about that a little bit already about going from gouache to oils, and we talked about watercolor. What was your first passion in terms of
Yeah, well,
materials, and how did that evolve?
so my first sort of, I would say, semi-professional art lesson was watercolor. And so as a former elementary art teacher, when I started painting, I wouldn't say professionally, but when I started painting with a more intent and more direction, I started with watercolor. And then that pretty quickly transitioned into balancing about 50-50 watercolor and acrylic. And it was interesting because I didn't, I had some instruction with watercolor, but I didn't have any instruction with acrylic. So I sort of invented my own processes. And if you even go back on YouTube right now and look at some of my 2011, 2012 acrylic demo tutorials, I mean, they're pretty entertaining. They're great to go back. It's such good content. It's crazy because you don't know what you don't know, and I know a lot more now. But it's also there's a certain level of, blind naiveness that I think is where sometimes magic can really happen. And sometimes it's weird because I look back on that early work in watercolor and acrylic, and sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be able to create such magical work again. Because sometimes those decisions, I don't think I realized how bold and courageous they really were at the time. I was just doing what felt right, which is
Yeah,
totally what
yeah.
you should be doing. And now that I know a lot more about the fundamentals and, I have thousands of paintings under my belt, it's a lot harder to break the rules. It's a lot harder to be more courageous. That's why, I mean, I've already talked about it today is, when I'm painting, you'll see a slide of the snow here in a second. I threw snow into that painting. I was drawing into that painting with sticks. And so this morning, throwing sand into my painting, I really, as a plein air painter especially, I want to sort of, you know, I want those elements to live and breathe in that work. So, maybe I'll get back there someday. So then it was 2014. I built I started experimenting with oils, and then I built my first solo exhibit, my first solo gallery exhibit in oils at the beginning of 2015. And I did, I think, about 60 paintings in oils. And by the end of that, I realized I didn't know anything. I mean, and so that's where I really started plein air painting more. And something that I did not expect to happen was truly falling in love with it. And to me now I mean, probably 95% of my work is outside, even here in the frozen tundra of Indiana. I think that slide we're about to see of me painting, it was a negative wind chill that day. So I think it was in the single digits. And I mean, I'll layer up, and I mean, I prefer to be barefoot in the sand in an 80-degree morning, but I'll go out and paint in the snow as well. So now I'm an
That's a
oil painter.
perfect, yeah, that's a perfect place to end that answer on, because my next question is you are always painting.
Yeah.
And I do. I see you bundled up in pictures and videos and on the beach or in the desert. But what do you do? What are some of the disciplines that you practice to keep up that kind of pace?
Yeah, well, one is I would suggest this to anyone that wants to paint more is you have to make it easy. You have to remove all barriers and excuses. And that's, I think sometimes, and even early on, I got caught up in all the tools and I need all of this and I need the perfect area and I need, I'm right now demoing in a back room of my parents' condo. I can create anywhere. It doesn't even matter anymore. And so I think removing those obstacles, making it as easy as possible. But then I think part of why I'm able to do that is I have materials I trust. I have brushes that I love. I have paint that I know how to use. I have, pigments that I know like the back of my hand. So I mean that stuff comes with experience. But then the other is I mean this kind of goes with the efficiency part, but it's just being really light. I like last night I knew I was going to come out. I've been painting a lot of pre-dawn paintings. So before the sun actually crests, there's a lot of really pretty color in the sky if you can get it. And so I'll pack my bag the night before. So all I have to do is carry it out the front door. Or like in Indianapolis, my paints never leave the back of my truck no matter the time of the year. My plein air setup is in the back of my truck right now in Indianapolis. I will put that tailgate down when I get back and I'll just start painting. So yeah.
I love that. Those are some great tips. Just prioritizing it, right? Prioritizing
Yeah.
it, but also making it easy on yourself. I love that you have your paint in your truck all the time.
And one of the most common questions I get is, does the temps affect the oil paint? And about 10 degrees or below, titanium white is really the only pigment that I feel a little bit different. It gets a little stringier. Like it's almost like you can, but the rest of the pigments, I feel like, and maybe this, I mean, I have painted a lot. I know what the pigment feels like. It doesn't feel that different to me. I mean, it's a little stickier, but not really,
Yeah, it's supposed to be good to -4 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, well, I've tested that and it's still good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's like a stick of butter, right?
Totally.
Out on the countertop, it's super soft, but when you put it in the refrigerator or freezer, it does stiffen up, but it never loses its ability to be workable.
Totally.
So yeah, so -4 is the sweet spot. All right, man. Well, let's look at some of the images you shared with me. So I'm going to go
Sure.
ahead and pull up that presentation, and then I'm going to share it. Let me put this on the larger screen there so everybody can see that. Oh, no, I want to make that smaller. There we go. Can you see that okay?
I can see it great. And so when I
All right.
talk, because we're not frozen, will people, are they just seeing my face right now? I won't.
They'll still see your face. Yeah, they
Yeah.
still see your face in a little bit of corner. But this is your gallery, right?
Yeah, this is. I bought this building at the end of 2018 with my little brother. It had been abandoned for years, just on the east side of downtown Indianapolis. And it's about 2,600 square feet. And so I've hosted probably about 20 exhibits over the years here. I do one big exhibit of my own work every March. This year will be about 150 paintings. That's up from last year, some number, but then I do a big invitational every fall that has about 40 national painters in that exhibit. And then some friends have solo exhibits here and there, but I've adopted the mindset less is more. And so I don't do an event every month here. I do 3 or 4 events a year, but when we open the doors, we go hard.
No,
So
that's
I
great.
sold out of the gallery. I was open. I did 3 events last year, and we sold just in those events, we sold over 300 paintings.
Incredible.
And so I sold over 400 of paintings if you include other people's sales out of the gallery last year.
That's spectacular. I mean, a real testament to your determination and commitment for sure.
Yeah, I think if you build it, they will come. And we've been going hard. So,
Awesome. No, that's super cool. So everybody out there, if you get a chance, I will post a link to Justin's website in the comments today too, so you can go check more out about this. You know what I need to do? We need to back up here. I'm gonna stop for a second because we were looking at the last slide there, and we need to be looking at the first slide. So I'm gonna go ahead and share one more time, guys, uh, so we can see the slideshow from the beginning. Was
oh,
it P?
yeah.
Right, there we go. So here we're looking at painting. Now this is fairly recent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's maybe 3 weeks ago. So my friend Tad Retz, he's a phenomenal painter, but he just moved out to Sedona, and I had never plein air painted the American Southwest. And so what better excuse? So I flew out with my Indianapolis friend Kate Orr. We flew to Sedona and we painted for a long weekend with Tad out there, and we averaged uh I think we painted 9 paintings a day for several days straight. So we didn't stop. It was super fun.
Yeah, Tad's a great painter. I
Yeah,
love his work too. Yeah.
he's
So what are
awesome.
you using here? What's your setup?
Yeah, so that's oil. So then the palette, left to right real quick. I use burnt umber. So I have burnt umber, ultramarine deep, and then cerulean. I use the brown madder deep, and then a transparent red oxide, cad red medium, yellow ochre, cad. I What's wild is I accidentally grabbed cad lemon, and I prefer cad yellow light. And I know there's two camps. Some people love lemon and some people are CAD light. And I will say I didn't love having the CAD lemon all weekend, but we got used to it. I warmed it up a little bit with the ochre and we pushed through. And then I had titanium white.
Yes. Nice. And is this the same easel you have with you right now?
Yeah, it's the exact same easel. That's just the underside of the palette. And I actually normally paint with it rested like that. For the sake of the demo, I wanted people to be able to see where I'm mixing. And so it's a great setup. I mean, I could paint with this thing vertical if I need to. So,
Very
uh,
cool. Very cool. This
and
is
this
one
is
of
my
those cold days you were talking
yeah.
about.
Yeah, that day I was in the single digits. It was super cold, and it's the same palette, the same colors. I just went, and yeah, it was even lightly snowing a little bit that day, but I love getting out and painting in the snow, and I mean I'm comfortable. I'm not even cold, so I'm ready for it.
Nordic blood you got.
Yeah,
So tell us about this. This is super fun.
yeah, this is recent too. I have struck up a little residency in Hinkle Fieldhouse at Butler University here in Indianapolis. So, one of the best college basketball venues in the entire country. I've painted several men's and women's basketball games this year there, and I have a few more upcoming at the end of February. So I'll be back in there. But live painting events is something it was not on my bucket list. It's something that randomly happened in 2017. I ran into Tamika Catchings, and I mean, a long story short, I ended up painting her jersey retirement during a Fever game back. I think that was 2017. I did that, and anyways, then I ended up painting another Fever game and then a Colts game, and I've now painted a bunch of Butler basketball games, and I've painted the Indianapolis 500, I think 7 years in a row now. So,
It's
uh,
fantastic.
yeah,
That's
I love it. It's so much fun.
it's such a unique thing to have a painter on hand for a sporting event like that to record it. You know, there's all these images, all these cameras, photographers, kind of stuff, but there's something about having a painter there that's so unique and offers a different perspective. Super
I,
cool.
one of the things I like about it is, and I don't know if this makes me weird or if it's a weird thing to say, but you can't suck. And like when they're about to put your painting up on the Jumbotron, I mean, it's gotta be good. I mean, there's thousands of people that are about ready to see this thing. It's you can't fake it. There's no hiding behind anything. You got to be really good at drawing. You have to have your color mixing buttoned up. You have to have your values mixed up or buttoned up. I love it. I really I enjoy being able to go into a setting like that and
Well, you can
perform.
have some courage too. No stage fright.
It's funny because I rarely get nervous. I really do, but it was one of the nights kind of after I started thinking too much because I think if I think too much about it, I will start to get a little bit nervous because you're like,
Yeah.
man, this really is, a lot of people watching what I'm up to, but
Talk about being on
overall
display.
it's fun. And I mean, if I was to paint this in the studio, over 20, 30, 40 hours, I mean, would it be a better painting? Of course it would. But to paint this in a couple hours during a live game, I mean, it's so fun.
Yeah, yeah. I well, I think it's a great exercise. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share, and so we can talk again. It's a great exercise, I think, when you have a short amount of time, you put some constraints or restrictions on your process, and then you get it done. And
Totally.
you can't overthink things. You just got to get to work and put in your values, put in your composition, get all that stuff done. And it's a great way to work, I think, for anyone. Not necessarily in front of a crowd, but just having some constraints or restrictions that you place on yourself, like a time limit. Uh,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have no choice but to run. It's in that decision making, it's fun. I find it not necessarily addicting, but it's really fun for me.
Awesome. Awesome. We're getting some questions in. We'll make sure we come
Sure.
back around to. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead, though. I want there to be
Yeah.
enough time for you, Justin. We still got a good 30
We
minutes left for the show
we
for you to do a
that's
demo.
so much time. You give me 3 minutes, we'll get this done.
All right.
What are the
I'm going to try
questions?
to be quiet because I don't want to steal the screen from you, but I'll let you know
Sure.
if we got a good question here.
Yeah, here we go. So I'm gonna show a couple. So here's what I've been up to since I've been in Marco Island. I've been painting. I mean, this is kind of right at sunrise. So right when the sun starts hitting the top. This isn't gouache. I've been painting down here both on aqua board and on illustration board. So I've been painting on both. So just some little right before sunrise, kind of right at sunrise. Right here's another pre-dawn. These cool colors are really attractive. There's this old pier out in front that's fun to paint. And I've got one more here. This was the first morning. And so these are all done plein air. So probably about an hour paintings ish, give or take some time. So
And these are all in gouache, right?
yeah, all in gouache. So, and I actually I start them all a little bit different. Sometimes I go right into washes. Sometimes I'm a little bit more, I'll draw it out and almost like paint by number it. So like there's kind of like 4 or 5 big shapes. So I'm gonna kind of go off this guy. It's sort of that pre-dawn. I'm gonna lighten the sky a little bit more than what you see on there just to boost the contrast. But I'm gonna do a little pre-dawn couple palm trees. So I and we make watercolor pencils. I love these things. I have like the whole spectrum. Normally, what I would do on a sunrise, I would start with a warm color. I would draw this thing out, but you wouldn't be able to see this on the demo. So for the demo, I'm just using a dark color. The dark color right now, it will make some of those yellows and oranges a little bit muddier. So that's why I wouldn't choose a dark color for this. But this isn't about making a great painting right now. It's about making a painting that you can see. So we've got the horizon line down here. And something I'm always trying to do is make sure my horizons are parallel. That's something every once in a while I'll finish a painting and my horizon line will be a little bit wonky. So make sure my horizon's parallel. And they've got the beach kind of coming down. So we've got beach, and I do this with all kinds of paintings, not just beach paintings. but I mask them into really big shapes. So I've got this sort of beach triangle, I've got my ocean triangle, and there's lots of variety of color within these shapes, but right now I'm just focused on getting the big shapes in. So it's sort of one shape, two shape, and then I'm going to do a couple palm trees. And then I just kind of roughed in the cloud. Jeff, can you see that pretty good on your end? Is it
Yep. Yep.
okay? Awesome. Okay. Now what I like to do is this is actually a trick I do. This is my water dish and even my watercolor pencil. So I put my watercolor pencil in there upside down. So all my brushes are upside down, my watercolor pencils. So when I get set up, I know what tools I've used and what tools I haven't used. And so I put my watercolor pencil back in there. And because right now it's normally this thing is sitting level, this thing just sits right on top of here because I don't have side panels, I don't have big wings on this thing like some of the super fancy ones. This really is a minimal setup. So uh, I got my brushes in there. And so with a gouache painting like this, I tend, if with oil paintings, you sometimes go dark to light. That's kind of the rule you hear. With gouache, I tend to go light to dark. And I usually go big brush to small brush. And so this is just a 1 inch flat synthetic. Uh, and I get it pretty watery. And then with the pre-dawn, let's see what we got going on. It kind of moves from an orange up into like a purplish into like a blue. And I'm gonna pull my value just a little higher. So I've got my cad yellow, my cad red, and you can see it's pretty watery down here. And then sometimes I don't need to. I also carry a little bit of a spray bottle. So if I needed to, because the only fresh paint on this palette that I've squeezed out for this demo is the titanium white. Everything else is from this morning and the past year. And so if I need to reanimate something even a little bit more, sometimes I'll spray this as I'm setting up. And so it just gets it a little bit wet. And that's enough that I can just start rocking and rolling. And if I need a more potent pigment, I can grab it. And then sometimes I'll even spray my working watercolor techniques wet on wet. I started doing this trip where I'll spray my sky a little bit, and it's a little bit risky. You'll see it drip a little bit, but that doesn't matter. And then I just go for it, and that's probably too yellow. I'm gonna kick it down with just a little bit of my ultramarine. I don't want to kick it down too much. Otherwise, it'll turn green. Let's see. And then gouache, I don't think it's alizarin. I think it's a permanent rose magenta with the gouache. I love this color. Uh, it's kind of like an alizarin. I've been using it a lot with these pre-dawn paintings. And this first pass, I keep it pretty loose and it's still pretty watercolory. I'm not really getting into the opacity qualities of the gouache yet. I'm treating it more like a watercolor.
I'm gonna jump in real quick and steal the show here. I love that about gouache. Gouache and watercolor have a lot of similar working properties. and then those few specific properties that make them unique. And it's really fun to play back and forth.
Man, I love it. As an artist that has a watercolor background that now paints primarily in oil paints, I think gouache is like the ultimate medium. I think if my professional practice was a little bit different, there's always going to be that something about selling oil paintings and gilded handmade frames that, I mean, it's just sort of like the peak quality. But man, in terms of just like fun, you can't beat this. And that fast, that's how, I mean, that's no joke how fast I was painting this morning. And so, especially painting on location when the light is changing so fast. I mean, I think it's more important to get the cut like the accurate color notes, and that's why I'm standing right there. It then sort of having all the brush strokes perfect and even, and sometimes that happenstance it ends up making what makes the painting towards the end. And so I'm gonna let that sky dry a little bit, and I actually, even in real, like, I guess this is real life, but I mean, this is just a demo. But a trick with watercolors is working different areas. So I have really three big primary shapes. You have this beach shape, ocean shape, sky shape. I will move to my beach shape because it's not physically touching the sky shape. If I was to go right into my ocean shape right now, some of that, I mean, gravity right now is going to prevent the ocean from going up into the sky, really. But, and having the sky come down into the ocean is definitely not the end of the world because it's reflecting each other. But if these were two very different fields, I wouldn't want those to touch. So I'm going to go right into the sand, and the sand is automatically going to be a darker value than my sky no matter what, but it's still going to be pretty light because it's receiving so much bounce light, ambient light from that sky. So I'm going to mix this color darker, cooler, and bluer. Man, and it's already looking a little bit beachy. And then the ocean, I've been painting it a lot. It's pretty green down here. And so it's cool because in these morning colors, that green informs the sunrise colors. So it's sort of the sunrise, I tinted a little bit green, and it kind of gives it that those really nice colors. This green will go down and inform some of that sand a little bit, but I'm not too worried about that. And then right there at the horizon, uh, I've been painting on the south side of the island, and we look out at, I can't remember the name of the island. There's a couple little islands just south of here that we can see on the horizon as we watch the sunrise. And so those islands, they're kind of grayed out. They're silhouetted. They're one of the darkest values in the entire painting, but they're not going to be as dark as those palm trees in the foreground. So they're kind of this bluish, purplish, grayish color. And then if I want to, I can soften those a little bit. And let me see. So to soften this horizon, this edge, it's kind of just a straight brush stroke. I'm just going to kind of dry brush. I mean, my brush is a little bit wet, but just kind of dry brush and give that a little bit more of an organic vibe. Sometimes I leave them pretty clean brushy if I like how it looks. Sometimes I give it an organic vibe. All right, that's looking pretty good. That is looking pretty good. Let me see here. So the brush, yeah, here it is. Gosh, I'm glad this was within reach. It would have been a lot harder. I use a number, what is this? A number four round synthetic. That is my workhorse travel brush. If I could only bring one brush to travel, it would be a 50-50 toss up between a half-inch flat and a number four round. I might pick the number four round just because on vacation, I like to relax and settle into my paintings and get a little bit more tedious into the detail. The half-inch flat, it prevents you really from getting too much into the detail, which is that tends to be a good thing. Um, but I really like this half-inch flat. So now what I'm doing down here, so I'm grabbing a little bit of my ultramarine deep, some of this I can't remember what color this was. I've actually been using it's a yellow medium instead of a yellow light. The palm tree, these are trickier colors. It's like this really dark, it looks almost like black. In real life, the trunks read is almost like a purple. The masses start to read as, I mean, it's a really dark green. And so sometimes like I'll use a dry brush technique on these. And so I don't know if you saw it, but I have a paper towel in my hand. I'm gonna grab some of that green and I'm pulling it out and there's still some of it on my brush. And by having not very much on it and dry brushing into it a little bit, it creates a little bit more happenstance and organic vibe to that shape. And then I don't want to get too into I'm not going to try to do every single little palm. So having just sort of an organic mass up here, the eye is going to fill in the void and we're going to see a lot more detail than what I actually am going to paint. So I'm just sort of scrubbing this in there in sort of like a palm tree style shape.
I love that, how the eye and the brain work together to make sense of what we see in the world, right?
Totally. And part of me is like one of the things I love about being a painter is in even like sometimes the more abstract and wild you get, sometimes the more real it can feel, but it also is like it traps the viewer because the viewer's finding interest and not quite understanding what they're looking at. Yeah, I think it's and finding that balance between, I want it to look like a palm tree, but I don't want to paint, 100 leaves.
You'll have to hold it to the camera a little closer after you're done working that, because from here, it looks just like a palm tree, right? And I want you to show people the brush strokes when you get a chance.
Yeah. So now I'm mixing this purplish color up. And the palm trees down here, I don't know what kind of palm trees these ones are, but they have these like almost like bulb things kind of right under them. All the palms are kind of sticking out. Kind of gives it that organic vibe. And right now my paint was pretty watery. Uh, so I'm gonna go a second pass to make it a little bit more opaque. But this second pass, I actually am going to draw almost like the contour lines of the palm tree curving around. I'm going to add just a hint of titanium white to bring up that opacity a little bit. So I drew it at first in a vertical line, but now in that you probably can't even see it, but these little lines up here, it's subtle, but it really starts to make it feel real. I'm gonna add just a bit more titanium white. The real subtle brush strokes, but I'm showing the turn of the tree, the contour of the tree. It's also when I'm sitting here in the morning painting these, it's crazy how much bounce light is coming off of the blue sand into the bottom of these palm trees. And so even though it's not a completely light and shadow painting as if the sun was out and there's a big shadow, this sand is gonna to put a little bit of bounce light up in here. So I paint that bounce light in. It's subtle, but it helps show the form of this thing. And then oftentimes I like to ground these things so there's not, it's weird when I paint these, it's such a hard line where the tree meets the sand oftentimes. It's just like a straight so I make up just some little line work, almost as if there's just like some grass or something. Not I don't want to get too much, but it just helps sort of ground it and root it in there a little bit. And then because I love how blue the sand looks in real life, like when I'm looking and observing it in the morning, I don't want to go too crazy with the saturation. I'm gonna grab some titanium white and some of that ultramarine, and I'm gonna mix it up decently opaque, a lighter value than probably what it should be. And I'm not gonna repaint the whole thing, but I'm gonna add just a little bit of variety in here. Make it almost look like there's some footsteps in the sand. And sometimes the more haphazard, the better. The angle that I'm at, I don't the beach that I'm at doesn't have a lot of it doesn't have a lot of wave. And so it's very calm. It's actually really peaceful. But there is still some of that. There's almost like this purplish where the sand is still wet, where it meets. So I'm gonna paint some of that wet sand. I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow in there. All right. So that would I would actually consider just my first pass. So now I've sort of masked in the big shapes. Everywhere has been touched on the panel. I was just getting a little bit into the detail. The first pass is done. Oftentimes this morning, that would take me probably about 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes to get to that point, depending upon how careful or how complex the scene is. Now is oftentimes the second pass. And even, I mean, within my work, if you look at my plein air paintings, some paintings that I post, oftentimes it's just like a singular pass. They feel more raw, more immediate. Another pass is going to take this thing to the next level. And I'll pull this off and show you what the single pass looks like up close. You can see up close, it's scratchier than you'd think. From farther away, it's reading okay. I'm looking at the reflection in the mirror. One thing I think is working, the value of the water I think is correct. I think the saturation, it's probably leaning a little bit too green. It probably needs to be a little bit more informed by that yellow above it. But overall, and you can see how abstract and wild those palm trees are. And so I'm going to bust out the tiny brush and put a few intentional palms in there. But I bet 10 brush strokes of intentionality on top of those masses, it's gonna make them read really well. You can start to see how soft and weird that horizon is. So by keeping it so soft, it's starting to read farther in the distance, and you can start to see how I grounded those trees a little bit. And you can see the bounce light in there. You can actually see right there's a little bit of drip from earlier. So putting some opacity in there and camouflaging that would be of priority. So I'm gonna treat that brush stroke first. I'm gonna warm up my water while keeping the value the same. So oftentimes, and this reminds me, it reminds me of when I was an elementary art teacher a little bit. Like always start with the lighter color, start with your yellow or don't start with the red. I'm gonna start with the white and I'm just gonna add a little bit and a little bit. I'm gonna get that going. So I'm gonna add a little bit of that green. I'm gonna get a little bit of that yellow, and then I'm gonna check value. If I was living in a perfect world with tons of time, I would probably check value on a separate piece of paper. Um, I just check my value right on the painting, and if it's wrong, I just fix it. And then gouache, this is something to remember, always dries a little bit darker. It tends to dry darker. And so my value looked spot on when I put it on, which means it's too dark. Trick of the trade right there. Go a little bit lighter. If it's looking right when you put it on, you're probably wrong. And the reason is because this is dry. If it was wet, it'd be fine. And it was a little bit too dark.
I was just going over that with folks. I've been answering some questions as they come up. Gouache is tricky that way. It
Yeah,
tends to dry to the middle. Lighter colors get darker and darker colors get lighter, but you get used to it. It becomes, yeah, becomes easy
totally.
to deal with. When you get a chance, we had another request to see the painting up close again. So when you got a good point.
Go. Start there. Something that I don't see it when I'm looking at it as much. You can see the yellow coming through that more. I really like these directions of it's creating good movement in the sky. So sometimes like I will lean into that a little bit. So if there was cloud cover in this, which there's been cloud wisping every morning, I might lay those clouds right into those shapes, and then I don't even have to paint the sky. Like I'll some of those lighter parts I'll go in there. And I'll do that real quick. With clouds, painting over, man, when I was painting watercolors all the time, I used to paint on very fancy, expensive paper. And the washes were always the most nerve-wracking part because when you get one that's beautiful, it becomes really hard to start to do anything on top of it because you don't want to mess it up. And uh, yeah, this one is already looking good. So there's a little bit of pressure. So with that in mind, I err in the side of conservative. I'm going to start not with a dark value. These clouds in the mornings, they tend to be pretty dark over top this light sky because nothing is illuminating them yet. There's just this silhouetted shape, the silhouetted mass on top of this light sky. And so there's sort of this dark bluish color. It's really dark grayish bluish color. So I'm going to mix the color in that realm. And then I'm going to take titanium white or opaque white with gouache. And I'm going to pull that value up really close to my sky value. So when I lay this in, it's not nearly as big of a risk. and it's still even, it's still reading pretty dark. And a lot of that, there is a value shift there, but a lot of it's just the temperature shift, that real warm versus that real cool. I
Hmm.
like how those are reading, so I'm gonna go for it a little bit darker.
Is it possible to pull it a little closer to the camera,
Yeah,
the whole thing while you're working? I
yeah.
know you're on vacation, so this was a spontaneous setup.
Oh,
So
it
folks,
was.
yeah,
Yeah, I can totally pull it closer. Let me get a little bit closer. Yeah, normally I have the thing with all the buttons, multiple cameras. I think
I love the spontaneity of this, Justin. This is how it is sometimes, right?
I hey, this just shows you can create anywhere, anytime with anything. Is that better?
Yes.
So I'm going to I'm gonna wisp this cloud right through my palm tree. Sometimes I would paint around it, sometimes I paint over it and then repaint. I do with gouache, I don't think this way as much as oil painting, but I do think there's a big sculptural aspect to painting, especially oil painting. There's a push and a pull. So with oil painting, not everything to me is additive. It can be subtractive, reducing and reduction. A lot of the early painting for me of an oil painting, especially a la prima plein air, it's reductive. So it's putting a bunch of paint on and then pulling a bunch of paint off, especially in the highlights. It's, getting that, yeah. But with gouache, I'm that reminded me right here. So I'm putting that cloud right through this thing, but I'm destroying that palm tree in the process, which sometimes that's bad, but sometimes that's actually really good. So there's a process of construction and then a process of deconstruction, and now it starts the process of reconstruction. And that's too bright of a value. Oops. I'll just put a few more intentional palms in there. Both of these palm trees right now, they're pretty heavy in the mass. Uh, I'm going to squeeze a little bit more titanium white out here. And I'm going to put a couple sky holes in. I have to be careful with sky holes. Too many, and it might start to destroy it. Just making them a little bit more airy. So there's some wind going through there. And then all those kind of have the same feel. While it's still wet, you could use a paper towel, but I'm just going to kill them a little bit, push them back into that shape, make them a little bit softer. And now we're starting to run a little bit low on time, but I would go back in and just clean up just a little bit parts of the sky. typically, especially on the ocean, there's usually clouds that are hanging around the horizon. You can just see so far, you're almost always going to see some clouds. Sometimes those little shapes can really add to the painting.
Looks good.
Thanks. I think, I mean, I could keep noodling on this thing for a while, but yeah, are there any more questions? I'll show this to you up close. So I did bring the sky higher key like I said I would this time. I just think it made it easier for viewers to see that contrast. But this was, let me see, where did I set that guy? Let me see. This is the one I did plein air the other morning. So, I mean, pretty much the same. I mean, I was being a little bit more literal to the scene I was seeing, but again, kind of the same shapes. You got the one shape, two shape, three shape, two palm tree. But you can see in this one how the masses, I mean, you can see those little strokes, but I mean, I painted them pretty much the same way I just did. And the clouds, kind of the same, just sort of a couple little wisps. But yeah.
No, I think this was a great example of how you can get a lot of information in a short amount of time. And then that spontaneity then can carry over to the finished piece.
Yeah. So this one too. So
Clouds are awesome in that one.
thanks. Yeah. It's so weird. Like I sometimes I just get lucky. You know what I mean? Like it's like, I mean, I have a lot of practice, but like this is one. So you can see behind me, there's paintings here. So all around my parents' condo, so they're renting this condo for the winter, and so it's not their art in this place. Otherwise, they'd have great art. But they so we've been putting my paintings on top of all the art in the condo. And so as I'm going around, this is one that was in the living room before this demo, and I was like, man, that thing, it's looking pretty good.
That's great. Well, let me ask you some of the questions that came up. I've been
Sure.
playing off here. I've been answering some of them as I can. Um, the arena scenes, the sporting events. The question here is, how do you pick an image with such fast movement? How do you decide what to paint?
Yeah, well, those ones are oftentimes dictated by where I'm allowed to stand. And then I mean, then it becomes obviously, I mean, they're not asking me to come there not to paint the court. So the court becomes the focal point. But then with Hinkle in particular, the architecture of that place is so unique. It's a 1928 beautifully brick constructed field house. And so those windows that you see in the upper right of that thing are incredibly iconic. And so with a venue like that, I didn't want on the panel that I took, if I had centered the court, I lose those windows. And so for me, it was just sort of I'm kind of playing with everything that's happening there, and I want to make sure I'm capturing, the venue and what makes that venue special, but I'm also capturing the event in the moment that makes it special. So sometimes it's when I start to take all those things into consideration, there's not too many options based upon where the venue places me because it's and that's something I do have to tell people is I'm not a magician. I kind of look like it sometimes, but I can't paint what I don't see. And so I can fudge a little for sure, but you can't set me on in the hallway and expect me to paint the court, or something like that. So I'm a little bit once I see where I'm going to be able to be placed. And with Hinkle, my wife and I had season tickets to the ball games for years. And so I knew that event or that venue really well. When they asked me to paint there, I knew exactly where I wanted to paint, and we made that happen.
Awesome. I had a question. What do you do with the painting of that? Is there a pre-arrangement or do you take it back to the gallery?
So the first one was for Butler. That one will live in Hinkle Field House. The others, we've been waiting for the right. Eventually, we've been trying to get sort of the magic combination of, unfortunately, most of the games that I've painted, they've lost. So we're looking for the right combination of, a really good win at home, and that I think they want to make reproductions for the gift shops. So I think they want to do some postcards and prints and stuff like that for their gift shop. So I don't think we have that painting yet. So I think we're going to keep going in there.
That's great. I love that they're waiting for a win. Put that in there. What else we got here? Looking, lots of just, oh, yeah, the illustration board. What size and type of illustration board are you using?
Yeah, so I've experimented. I was actually just on Amazon recently. I bought some new ones this time that I had never used. I bought, well, this is one of them. I've been using, this is what I've been using this trip on the illustration board side, is the Canson mixed media board. I haven't pulled it out yet. I do have the Rembrandt watercolor papers with me. I haven't tried those yet this trip. And then I've been painting, I don't have one within grabbing distance, but I've been painting a lot of them on um, the Aqua board by Ampersand. So it's a hard board, and that one, part of what I don't like about that one on an airplane, it's heavier. So I put all of those ones in my wife's suitcase. The nice thing about traveling with the illustration board, it's still adding weight, but it's not adding as much as a hardboard. But what I love about the hardboard ones, besides the weight aspect, is the rigidity. So you can varnish them and present them like a true oil painting, and they're on a rigid substrate, which and the other thing is on the illustration boards. I've had this problem with my own paintings, but there's a spray varnish that a lot of painters use that's UV. I think it's the Krylon 325 or 365 or 375. I can't remember the number of it. But it's one of those UV protective clear final permanent varnishes that people put on gouaches. And on illustration board, the heavier opacities, they will reflect that gloss more than these thin washes. Where I put that varnish, it takes several coats of that varnish to get a more even coat, but even with some of them. So I don't love that about the illustration board if I'm going to use a final varnish and present it more like an oil painting, because there's going to be different settling with that varnish on there. Talens, we actually make a watercolor varnish that works perfectly. The unfortunate part, and I don't know if we still distribute through Joanne Fabrics, but it's decently hard to get. So
Online, yeah, it's probably the best place. It's tough to find in a brick and mortar store, but you
yeah.
can get it on,
And
on online retailers.
yeah, I whenever it restocks in Indy, I go and buy every bottle.
I love it.
Yeah, they're probably like, who is this one person buying this SKU? It's this guy.
It's this guy right here. One
Uh,
last question before we have some final announcements, and that is largest painting. Do you paint larger sizes?
Yeah, so I've done big murals. And so I did a piece for Butler University back in, I think, 2018 or 2019 or 27, I don't know, a long time ago. And it was 20 feet wide by 40 feet tall. That one, I mean, that's big. And I did all of that in Amsterdam acrylics. And then I did another painting that was 12 foot by 40 foot. And I did that one all in Amsterdam acrylics. So
How about
yeah.
oil paintings?
Oil paintings, the biggest one I think I've done is 3 foot by 5 foot. So well, nope, I take that back. I just did one. I just did one that was 4 by 10. Sorry about that. I guess I have done a couple big oil painting. Oh, I can think of more. I know I did one that was 8 foot by 10 foot a few years back. So I've gone pretty big with oil painting too.
Yeah,
I
that's
just,
large. That's a large oil painting. Yeah.
yeah, I just don't go that big that often. I mean, it takes a lot of work to pull those big ones off.
That's awesome. Um, Last question to you. Where can we see more of your work, workshops, events coming up?
Yeah, so well, you mentioned the website. I think you posted the link. Instagram is actually, I think, even better than that. Instagram is by far where I'm the most active. And if you do not have Instagram, Instagram is on my website. So my Instagram just populates right through my gallery page on my website. So that's the best spot to check me out.
Cool. And then you've got an event coming up, right, at the
Oh
gallery?
yeah, I do. Thanks for reminding me. I do one big annual solo exhibit every year. I used to do that in a third party gallery. I bought part of the big reason why I bought the building was so I could self-host that event. And I mean, I'm a small business. I have to think about, profit. And so as to recoup that gallery expense. And so I self-host my big gallery show last year, and it's so much fun. If you're anywhere near the Indianapolis area, you have to come and check it out. Last year on opening night, if you come at 5 o'clock on March 7th, nothing is sold, everything is available. There will be about 150-ish paintings, give or take. Last year was 139 on opening night, no pre-sales. Last year we sold 82 paintings on opening night. So it's fun. I mean, it's a lot of art and art from all over. It's not art from the last month, it's art from the last year. So pretty much everywhere I've traveled, the year I went to Seattle, I had a bunch of West Coast paintings. This show, I'll have Marco Island, I'll have Sedona, Arizona, I'll have Door County, Wisconsin, obviously Central Indiana, I'll have Southern Indiana, Brown County, Indiana Dunes. I mean, I'm sure I've traveled other places this year too. So
Awesome. Well, best of luck with that. I know you'll be
thank you.
successful. You're like I said, you're the hardest working artist I know.
I appreciate that. Well, the good thing is I am addicted to painting. I mean, that's one thing I never stop thinking about it. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, well, thank you, Justin. This has been awesome to have you here. It's been great to be able to talk to you and see your process and hear some of the tips. A lot of folks are really thankful. A lot of great comments coming through the feed. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. The next show is going to be Wednesday, February 18th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 Pacific time. It's going to be with another ambassador of ours, another favorite, Lori McNee, who's going to be doing some demos with the Cobra water mixable oils. So lots of interest in that. So make sure you join us for that show, February 18th, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 Pacific. And then I've got a winner to announce. So we're giving away a bunch of paint, and Miss Missy, you are the winner. I'm going to go ahead and post that. Please DM me at Royal Talens NA. So that's in the feed there too as well if you missed it. Or you can watch this whole show too, everybody, on replay. So if you missed any part of it, you can go back and enjoy it at your leisure. But again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Justin. This has been great.